I grew up in a house where silence carried more weight than words. My father was the kind of man whose presence filled a room even when he said nothing, and my mother was the opposite. Gentle, attentive, her love expressed through small rituals that stitched our days together. Between them stretched an invisible gulf I couldn't yet name, but I felt it in the way their eyes rarely met across the dinner table. At 14, I was still young enough to need my mother's presence at night, yet old enough to sense the unspoken tensions around me. She would come into my room each evening, humming as she smoothed the bedsheets and whispered reminders to finish my homework, to dream of good things. It was a ritual that belonged only to us, a private ceremony where I felt safe. Her soft voice made the world seem whole again, even when the walls of our home vibrated with distance. My father, meanwhile, had grown more elusive as the years passed. His work as a businessman took him out at odd hours. He returned home late, smelling faintly of cologne and cigarettes, his phone pressed to his ear as if it were an extension of his hand. When he did speak, it was brisk, practical, devoid of warmth. I cannot recall the last time I saw him laugh with my mother. She bore it silently, folding her disappointment into long stares out the window and the quiet tapping of her fingers against the kitchen counter. I did not yet have the vocabulary for betrayal, but I understood absence. I understood how my mother's eyes followed him when he left, searching for something she no longer found when he returned. And I understood how she clung to her rituals with me, perhaps because I was the last part of her world that still felt certain. That night, like so many before it, began with the usual rhythm. My father excused himself after dinner, muttering about urgent work, his plate half full. My mother gathered the dishes without comment, her movements careful, measured, as though any sudden sound might cause the fragile balance of our home to fracture. Later, she appeared in my doorway, carrying a small lamp because the power had flickered earlier. Her shadow stretched across the wall as she sat beside me, smoothing my blanket. I watched her closely, noticing the faint lines at the corners of her mouth, the way her smile no longer reached her eyes. "Mama," I whispered. "Why are you always so quiet when Baba leaves?" Her hand stilled for just a second before resuming its gentle rhythm. "Some things are better left unsaid," she murmured. Her answer lingered in the air long after she stopped speaking. I didn't know it then, but those words were more than a dismissal. They were a warning, one I would only understand fully later, on the night when silence would no longer protect us, and the truth would finally reveal itself. The lamp's glow flickered across my room, throwing uneven shadows on the walls. My mother's hand lingered on the blanket as though holding on to the moment, unwilling to let the night move forward. Then her gaze shifted, past me, toward the dresser by the corner. I followed her eyes. There, half hidden under a folded scarf, was a phone. My father's. He never left it behind. It was his constant companion, clutched tighter than any briefcase, protected with the same vigilance as money. Seeing it there, glowing faintly with a notification, felt unnatural, like spotting a snake curled in the middle of our safe, familiar room. My mother froze. The air thickened as she stepped toward it, each movement deliberate, almost reluctant. She lifted the phone as though it might burn her fingers. For a long moment she just stared, her reflection staring back from the dark screen. Then it lit again, revealing a preview. "I miss you too. Tomorrow can't come fast enough." A tremor crossed her face. Her lips parted, but no words followed. I was old enough to sense what that message meant, even if I couldn't grasp the full weight of it. My chest tightened with something sharp and unfamiliar. Fear, anger, confusion, all tangled together. "Mama?" My voice cracked in the silence. She blinked, startled by my presence, as if she had forgotten I was still watching. She tried to smile, but her hands trembled too violently to complete the disguise. Without a word, she unlocked the phone, her fingers moving quickly, almost expertly across the screen. What she found there silenced the room even further. Message after message scrolled past her eyes. Words drenched in intimacy, photographs carrying a kind of laughter I hadn't heard from my father in years. Each new detail carved lines of pain deeper into her expression. I wanted to turn away, to close my eyes, but I couldn't. The truth was unfolding before me, piece by piece. and I was a captive witness. My mother set the phone down on the dresser with a force that rattled the lamp. She pressed her palms against her face, her shoulders shaking, though she refused to make a sound. I reached out, unsure, placing my hand on hers. "Mama, what does it mean?" She lowered her hand slowly, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. "It means," she whispered, voice raw, "that your father is not the man I thought he was." The words hung between us, heavy and irreversible. The safety of our nightly ritual crumbled, replaced by a truth that neither of us had asked to see. Then, breaking the silence, came the sound of the front door opening. My father was home. The click of the front door echoed through the hallway like the strike of a match. My mother stiffened, the phone still in her grip, her knuckles pale from the force of her hold. For a moment, neither of us breathed. Footsteps followed, measured, steady, confident. My father's silhouette appeared in the doorway, broad shoulders framed by the dim light of the corridor. His eyes moved from me to my mother, lingering on her clenched hands. "You're both awake?" His voice was casual, but a sharp edge lurked beneath it. My mother straightened, forcing calm into her tone. He wasn't asleep yet. I watched the exchange, my heart thudding so loudly I thought it might betray us. My father slipped his hands into his pockets, scanning the room. "Strange," he said lightly. "I thought I left my phone in here." Her grip tightened. In that instant, she looked smaller yet fiercer, a woman holding more than just a device, holding proof that could unravel everything. Slowly, she extended it toward him, but her voice cut through the air before he could take it. "Who is she?" The question was soft, almost tender, yet it struck like thunder. My father's jaw tightened. He chuckled, dismissive, though the sound rang hollow. "You're imagining things." "I'm not." Her tone steadied, each word deliberate. "I've seen enough." For the first time, his mask slipped. A flicker of unease crossed his face before he smoothed it away, retrieving the phone with forced nonchalance. He glanced at me, as though measuring how much I had understood, then turned back to her. This is not a conversation for tonight. But she didn't move, didn't yield. Her eyes glistened with a quiet rage I had never seen before. It should have been a conversation years ago. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father's gaze hardened, but he said nothing more. He turned on his heel, leaving the room with a heaviness that shook the floorboards. My mother sank onto the edge of my bed, the fight draining out of her all at once. She pressed a hand to her forehead, her breathing shallow. I sat up, uncertain, my own voice trembling. "Mama, what will happen now?" She looked at me then, her eyes tired yet unbroken. "Now," she whispered, "we live with the truth." The words settled over us like dust, impossible to sweep away. I felt the finality of them, the certainty that nothing would return to the way it had been. And yet, even as the house fell back into silence, I knew this was not an ending. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The house felt different the next morning, quieter, though not in the comforting way I remembered. It was the silence of something broken, of words withheld but too heavy to ignore. My father left early, offering no more than a muttered goodbye. My mother stayed in the kitchen, her hands moving through the motions of cooking, though she barely touched her food. I watched her closely, noticing how every gesture seemed slower, more deliberate, as though she were piecing herself together with each stir of the spoon. She wasn't a woman undone. She was a woman holding the weight of knowledge that could not be unseen. In the days that followed, nothing was spoken aloud, yet everything had changed. My father still came and went, his excuses thinner, his presence sharper. My mother still smiled for neighbors, still maintained the structure of our home, but her eyes no longer softened when he entered a room. A distance had settled between them, visible even to me, and I carried that distance too, like a shadow that trailed me everywhere. At school, I found myself distracted, my thoughts returning to the glow of that phone screen. My friends laughed, planned cricket matches, argued about homework, but I felt older somehow, as though I had glimpsed a truth reserved for adults. I had learned that love could fracture, that loyalty could bend, and that the people we trust most can harbor secrets large enough to undo entire families. One evening, weeks later, I gathered the courage to ask her, We sat together in the living room, the television murmuring faintly in the background. "Mama," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" She turned to me slowly, her expression softer than I expected. "Because," she said, "some truths are too heavy to carry when you're still learning how to stand." Her words sank deep. She wasn't shielding herself, she had been shielding me. Yet, that night in my room, she hadn't been able to keep the truth locked away any longer. In some unspoken way, she had allowed me into her pain, and in doing so, changed the way I saw her forever. Years later, when I look back on that night, I see it as the hinge on which my childhood closed and something else began. It was not only the discovery of betrayal, but also the beginning of my understanding of resilience, the quiet kind that does not roar but endures. My mother and I never spoke of every detail, but we didn't need to. The silence between us held more honesty than words could. She had been betrayed, yes, but she had not been broken, and I, too, learned something essential, that truth, once seen, cannot be unseen, and that sometimes the most powerful stories we carry are the ones we never intended to witness. Time has a way of dulling sharp edges, but some memories refuse to fade. That night, my mother's trembling hands clutching my father's phone, the question that left him silent, the weight of betrayal hanging heavy in the air, still plays in my mind with the clarity of yesterday. In the months that followed, our home became a theater of unspoken truths. My father maintained his routines, his excuses rehearsed, his silences louder than words. My mother moved through the days with a quiet strength, her gaze distant yet unbroken. And I existed between them, carrying knowledge I should never have had to carry, trying to make sense of a world where the people I loved most had become strangers to one another. There were no explosive arguments, no slammed doors or public scenes. Instead, the conflict settled into the walls of our house like a hidden crack, invisible to outsiders but growing deeper with time. I learned to read the language of avoidance, the way my mother's smile never lingered when my father spoke, the way his eyes darted away whenever hers held steady. It was a battle without shouting, fought in silence, and I was its unwilling witness. Yet in that silence, I also discovered something unexpected. My mother's strength was not in denial but in endurance. She did not let betrayal define her. Instead, she carved out small spaces of joy where she could, gardening in the mornings, reading in the afternoons, sitting with me in the evenings as though reminding us both that love could still exist, even if it had changed its shape. One night, long after the initial wound, I asked her quietly, "Do you hate him?" She paused, considering the question carefully. "No," she said at last. "Hate only chains you to the hurt, but I can never look at him the same way again." Her words struck me. They weren't bitter. They were resolute. She had chosen not to let anger consume her, but she had also chosen not to pretend. That balance, between pain and dignity, etched itself into my understanding of what it meant to survive heartbreak. Looking back now, I realize the central conflict of that time was never only about infidelity. It was about truth, how much we can bear, how much we hide, and how much we choose to live with once it can no longer be denied. My mother faced it with quiet courage, my father with evasive silence, and I, as their child, absorbed both responses, trying to decide which path would shape me. What lingers most is not the betrayal itself, but the lesson it carried. That love is fragile, trust even more so, and that sometimes survival is not about repairing what is broken, but about learning how to live beside the cracks. And even now, when I close my eyes, I hear my mother's voice from that night. Now we live with the truth.